Most people spend their entire lives performing. They perform in meetings. They perform at family dinners. They perform for strangers on the internet who will never remember their name. They calibrate every word, every decision, every version of themselves against one question that runs like a background process in everything they do. What will they think of me? You know this question. You have lived inside it. Some of you have lived inside it so long that you have forgotten there was ever an outside. But there is a rare thing that happens to certain people. It doesn't happen easily. It doesn't happen because they read the right book or found the right quote. It happens after enough pain, after enough performance, after enough exhaustion from maintaining an identity built on the approval of people who were never qualified to give it. They stop. They stop needing it. And when that happens, when the approval circuit genuinely breaks, everything changes. Not gradually, not gently, everything. Today, we are going to walk through exactly what happens to a person when they stop needing approval. Not the motivational version, not the version that tells you it feels like freedom and sunshine and suddenly the world is beautiful. The real version, the Machiavellian version, the version that explains why the most powerful people you have ever encountered seem to operate by entirely different rules than everyone else. Because they do. And you are about to understand why. Phase 1. The Withdrawal. Machiavelli wrote, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." But there is a phase before command. There is a phase before authority. There is a phase that almost no one talks about because it is the ugliest, most disorienting part of the transformation. The withdrawal. When you first stop seeking approval, genuinely stop, not as a performance of not caring, but as an actual internal shift, it feels nothing like freedom. It feels like loss. Because approval is a drug. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. Every time you received validation, a compliment, a laugh, a nod of agreement, a like on a post, your brain released dopamine, the same system that handles food, sex, and addictive substances handles social approval. You were not weak for needing it. You were human. Your brain was working exactly as designed. But when you stop feeding that system, it responds the way every system responds to the removal of its drug. It screams. It generates anxiety. It tells you that something is wrong, that you are alienating people, that you are becoming cold, that you need to go back and say something, post something, apologize for something. This is the test, and most people fail it. They go back. They post the apology they did not owe. They over-explain. They rebuild the performance. And they tell themselves they are being the bigger person when they are actually just feeding the addiction. The few who survive the withdrawal come out different, quieter, slower, more deliberate. They have learned something that cannot be taught, only endured. That the anxiety was never about the situation. It was about the drug leaving their system. And once you know that, you can never unknow it. John Bowlby, the psychiatrist who mapped attachment theory, tracked what happens when children learn that their needs will not be reliably met. He found that they do not simply grow up damaged in obvious ways. Often they grow up appearing remarkably capable, competent, independent, functional, because the brain does not just collapse when it cannot get what it needs. It learns to need less. Or rather, it learns to deny that it needs at all. And that denial carries into every relationship, every workplace, every crisis of adult life. The person who learned at 6 that asking was dangerous does not consciously decide at 30 to handle everything alone. They simply cannot imagine doing otherwise. Phase 2. The relationships change. Here is the first thing that happens when you stop needing approval that no one warns you about. Some of your relationships will not survive it. Not because you became cruel, not because you stopped caring about the people in them, but because many relationships are not actually built on mutual care. They are built on a dynamic, a transaction, and the transaction was, you perform, they validate. You manage their emotions, they tolerate your presence. You make yourself smaller, they feel larger. When you stop performing, you break the transaction. And the person on the other side of that transaction has two options. They can either meet you as an actual equal, which requires them to examine themselves in ways they may not be willing to do, or they can leave. Many will leave. Machiavelli observed this with cold precision. He wrote that a man who changes his nature will always lose the friends he made when his nature was different. This sounds like loss. It is actually selection. The people who leave were never there for you. They were there for the version of you that served them. What remains after the withdrawal is different, smaller often, but real in a way that the previous collection of relationships was not. The people who stay when you stop performing are the people who are actually interested in the person underneath the performance. And for many who go through this, that is the first time in their lives they experience what actual loyalty feels like. Not loyalty to your usefulness, loyalty to you. Here is something important to sit with. The relationships that end were not relationships at all. They were arrangements. You provided something, consistency, warmth, availability, the performance of easiness, and they provided proximity. It felt like connection because the brain is not good at distinguishing genuine care from reliable presence. But presence without real seeing is not connection. It is furniture. And when you change, the arrangement breaks because the arrangement was never designed for you to change. The relationships that survive are a different category entirely. They are the ones built on something underneath the performance, something that saw you when you were not trying to be seen, something that did not require the act in order to stay. These are the relationships worth having. And most people never find them because they never stop performing long enough to discover which ones they are. Phase 3. You become unreadable. Something else begins to happen after the withdrawal completes. Something that other people notice before you do. you become difficult to read. When you were seeking approval, you were broadcasting constantly. Your body language was optimized for reception. Open posture, frequent agreement, laughter calibrated to the room, eye contact calculated for warmth. Every signal designed to say, I am safe, I am friendly, I want you to like me. When you stop needing approval, the broadcast stops. You still speak, you still engage, but the signal has changed. The desperate frequency is gone. What remains is something that reads to the ancient parts of other people's brains as, this person does not need me. And that is one of the most psychologically destabilizing things one human can communicate to another. We are tribal animals. We evolved in groups where belonging was survival. The person who does not need the group triggers a deep, primal question in everyone around them. Why don't they need us? What do they know that we don't? Are they dangerous? Carl Jung called this the projection of the shadow. When people cannot read you, they project onto you. They fill the blank with their own fears, their own desires, their own unresolved material. They make you larger and more significant than you are, without doing anything, without trying, simply by not performing. Psychologists call this cognitive opacity. The person who cannot be read generates what researchers call projected significance. Others fill the blank space with something larger than reality. This is the psychological mechanism behind why quiet people in rooms so often seem to command them. It is not that they are smarter or more powerful. It is that they are unknown. And the unknown always feels larger than the known. The known person has a ceiling. The unknown person has none. The irony is complete. The version of you that desperately wanted to be seen, respected, taken seriously, that version was invisible. And the version of you that stopped caring about being seen, that version commands the room. Phase 4. Your decisions change. This is the phase that changes everything practically, the one that has real-world consequences. When you stop needing approval, you stop making decisions based on what they will think. This sounds simple. It is not. Because the approval calculation runs underneath almost every decision most people make. Not just social decisions, professional ones, financial ones. The career they chose because their parents would be proud. The relationship they stayed in too long because leaving would be judged. The opinion they kept quiet because the room would disagree. The approval machine is not an occasional voice. It is the operating system. When it comes offline, you start making decisions based on something else entirely. Something quieter and slower and less articulate, but far more accurate. What do I actually want? What is actually true? What would I do if no one would ever know? Machiavelli described this as operating from virtue. Not virtue in the moral sense, but from the root, force, capability, will, the capacity to act from your own assessment of reality rather than from the expectations of others. Most people never access this. They live in reaction. Every decision downstream of 1,000 calculations about how it will be perceived. Their life is not theirs. It is a collaborative project between them
and the audience in their head. The person who stops needing approval dissolves the audience. They start living from a first-person perspective for perhaps the first time in their lives.
And the decisions that come from that place are faster, cleaner, and almost always more correct. Notice what this means practically. The person who stopped needing approval does not deliberate less. They deliberate differently. Where the approval-seeking mind asks, "Will this be accepted?" the sovereign mind asks, "Is this true?" Where the approval-seeking mind asks, "What will they think?" the sovereign mind asks, "What do I actually see?" This is not selfishness. This is accuracy. Decisions made from an honest reading of reality are almost always better for everyone involved than decisions made from an anxious calculation of how they will land. Phase 5. Conflict transforms. Before the shift, conflict was unbearable. You avoided it. You preempted it. You smoothed it over before it fully formed. You absorbed things that should not have been absorbed. You apologized for things that were not your fault. You bent the story to make the other person comfortable because their discomfort was your responsibility. This is what the approval-seeking brain does with conflict. It treats it as a threat to social belonging, which means it treats it as a threat to survival. After the shift, something fundamental changes in how conflict lands. You can hear an accusation without immediately feeling the need to defend yourself. You can hold a disagreement without the anxiety that the relationship will not survive it. You can say no without the spiraling guilt that follows most people's refusal. This is not because you stopped caring about other people. It is because you separated the relationship from the approval. You can care about someone without needing them to approve of you. You can respect someone without needing them to validate your position. You can love someone and still hold your ground completely. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who is too eager to be loved will always be manipulated by those who offer love as leverage. The person who has stopped needing approval removes this lever completely. They cannot be moved by the withdrawal of warmth because they are not operating from a position of warmth scarcity. The result is a different kind of presence in conflict. Not aggressive, not cold, simply stable. And stability in the face of another person's storm is, ironically, the thing most likely to resolve it. Phase 6. You begin to frighten people. This is the part that surprises almost everyone who goes through it. You start to notice that certain people are uncomfortable around you. Not people who dislike you, people who cannot quite figure you out. People who try their standard social moves, the flattery, the subtle put-down, the expectation of reciprocal validation, and find that none of them land. The flatterer discovers that you receive the compliment without lighting up the way you used to. You say thank you and mean it, but there is no flood of relief, no rush of warmth that pulls you toward them. The compliment entered and did not change anything. The person who usually controls rooms through the strategic withdrawal of approval discovers that withholding their approval from you produces no visible effect. You are not chasing their validation. You are not adjusting your behavior to recapture it. The manipulator, who usually operates by making people feel unseen, finds that your sense of self is not contingent on their seeing.
These people will tell others that you have changed, that you are cold now, that you think you are better than everyone. This is not what they actually mean. What they mean is, I cannot find the button that used to work.
And a person without buttons is the most frightening thing in the room to someone who operates through buttons. Jung wrote that the thing people find most threatening in others is always the thing they most fear in themselves. The person who has stopped needing approval confronts everyone still in the approval trap with the possibility of their own freedom. And freedom, to someone who has built their entire psychology around its opposite, feels like annihilation. There is a specific moment when this shift becomes visible to others. It is not dramatic. Someone says something designed to wound, and you do not flinch. Someone withdraws their warmth, and you continue at the same temperature. Someone challenges your decision, and you hear them, consider them, and remain unchanged. And you see it in their face. A micro-expression of confusion. The expected reaction did not come. The button was pressed, and nothing happened. They recalibrate. They press harder, and still nothing. And in that moment, something changes in how they relate to you, permanently. Phase 7. You find what you actually want. This is the last phase, and the quietest. It does not arrive dramatically. It does not announce itself. It appears one day in a small decision, something you chose not because anyone expected it of you, not because it would be seen or applauded, but simply because it was yours. When the approval machine goes quiet, you discover something that it had been drowning out your entire life. Your own voice. Not the voice that has opinions calibrated for the room. Not the voice that says things designed to land well. The voice beneath that. The one that knows what you actually find beautiful and what you find hollow. What you actually want to build and what you are building to impress. Who you actually want to spend time with and who you were spending time with because abandoning them would have required explanation. Most people live their entire lives without hearing this voice clearly. The approval machine is too loud. The audience in the head is too demanding. The gap between the performance and the person is never closed because closing it would require disappointing people who are not owed the performance in the first place. The person who survives the withdrawal, who watches the relationships reconfigure, who becomes unreadable, who starts making real decisions, who stops collapsing in conflict, who begins to frighten the manipulators. They arrive here. Quiet, clear, in possession of themselves in a way that nothing external can touch. This is not arrogance. Arrogance requires an audience. This is something different. Something that Machiavelli and Jung and every serious student of the human psyche have pointed toward from different angles. Sovereignty. The ownership of your own experience. The refusal to outsource your sense of self to people who never earned the contract. This is what is on the other side of the withdrawal. Not confidence in the self-help sense, not the feeling good version, but something structural, something that does not depend on the day going well or people responding correctly or circumstances cooperating. A relationship with yourself that is not contingent on external confirmation. The kind of internal stability that cannot be installed, only built, through exactly the process we have been describing. Through the discomfort of the withdrawal, through the grief of watching certain relationships fall away, through the strangeness of becoming unreadable, through the clean terror of making decisions that serve no audience, through all of it. Now, I want to ask you something directly. When is the last time you made a decision that no one else would ever know about and that served no one's approval but your own? If you cannot answer that question quickly, if you have to search for it, then you already know what this video is about. The path out is not dramatic. It is not a single moment of enlightenment. It is the next time you feel the pull to explain yourself to someone who does not deserve the explanation. Pause. Notice the pull and let it pass. That is the first withdrawal. There will be others. Each one is smaller than the last. The path that was always there. The one that was waiting beneath every performance you ever gave. The one that leads not to being loved more widely, but to being known more truly. Which, as it turns out, is the only thing that was ever worth finding. And on the other side of enough of them is a person you have not met yet. You will recognize them. They will not be performing. Most people who go through this process describe a moment, not a dramatic one, not a cinematic one, where they simply stop waiting for permission, for something they want to do, for something they want to say, for a version of themselves they have been postponing until it would be accepted. They stop waiting and they start. And the world does not end. The relationships that matter do not collapse, and they realize with a quiet that is almost unbearable in its simplicity that the wait was always optional, that the permission was always theirs to give. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback.